Hare Krishna, welcome everyone to this program on the book Nectar of Devotion, which is a summary study, a book written by ISKCON's founder Acharya A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Today we will be discussing on chapter number 3 and chapter number 4 of this book. The title of chapter number 3 is Eligibility of Candidate for Accepting Devotional Service, and chapter number 4, the title in Nectar of Devotion is Devotional Service Surpasses All Liberation. Overall, since we have started this program, this is our 7th class on this topic. I would like to now invite Mangala Mataji to kindly recite Mangala Charan prayers for the benefit of the class. Mangala Mataji, over to you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you.
Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapnantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Pada Kamalam Shri Guruna Vaishnavancha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna नाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजन सहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांच हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I will leave the class now and I will listen the record because some guests are there, Prabhuji. Sorry, Prabhu.
Okay, Mataji, no problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you for nicely chanting the Mangala Charan prayers.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Yeah. So now we will start our program by discussing the summary of previous class. In the previous class, we had discussed about chapter number 2 of Nectar of Devotion, which is primarily about covering verses from 1 to 13 verses. Let me just check verses 1 from chapter number 2, verse number 1 till verse number, I think it was 13th verse. Yeah, it was 13th verse. And primarily we started this discussion on various types of Uttama Bhakti. And in particular, we are starting our discussion on Sadhana Bhakti in this chapter number 2. So 3 types of Uttama Bhakti: Sadhana Bhakti, Bhava Bhakti, and Prema Bhakti. And then we discussed about the difference between Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti, and Sadhana Bhakti, all 3 types. In order to explain you the difference between all these 3 types of bhaktis, we mentioned that Bhava Bhakti means direct realization of Krishna. And in Sadhana Bhakti, we don't have direct realization of Krishna. Sadhana Bhakti, we are mainly following the rules and regulations of the scriptures, rules and regulations given to us by our teachers, by our Guru. That's what we are following. But we don't have any direct realization of Krishna in Sadhana Bhakti stage. However, the objective of Sadhana Bhakti is to achieve Bhava. Bhava means realization of Krishna. Then we understood the difference between Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. The difference between Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti is that at the Bhava Bhakti stage, still there are some anarthas present in the heart of the devotee. And these anarthas are not at all there at the stage of Prema Bhakti. And when I talk about anarthas, uh, I'm talking about those lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy. So as we continue to progress in our bhakti, the volume and the intensity of lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, it starts to fade and then fade even further and fade even further. And by the stage we reach Bhava Bhakti, all these anarthas, all these impurities in our heart are mostly gone, but still there are some traces of these anarthas are present at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. However, when we reach Prema Bhakti, all these anarthas or aparadhs means offenses, offenses towards the Lord, offenses towards the devotees of the Lord, and so on. All these offenses, all these impurities are completely gone at the Prema Bhakti stage. So very, very advanced stage. As we have been discussing in this book, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu or Nectar of Devotion, there are definitions given by Srila Rupa Goswami at different intervals. So, like you have discussed a definition of Uttama Bhakti in the previous class, and then now introducing few more definitions. For example, definition of Sadhana Bhakti. So, Sadhana Bhakti, the definition we discussed was that it is done with senses to achieve bhav, like we discussed here. So there is no direct realization of Krishna, but we engage our senses, our mind, and our knowledge acquiring senses, our working senses, mainly to achieve bhav, that is direct realization of Krishna. Then, in this definition, the second line clarifies that this bhav actually is not something artificial that we create by doing this sadhana, by doing this practice. This is not something artificial. This is already present in the heart of the jiva. But when we do this sadhana, this bhav, this realization of Krishna is uncovered. That is what we understood in the definition of sadhana bhakti. And we gave you a couple of examples, couple of analogies to understand this point. And one of the analogy we gave was that a small child, maybe a 1-year-old child or a 6-month-old child, that child cannot walk. But that does not mean that the walking potential is not there in the child. That is there in the child, but with time, but with some practice, that walking potential is uncovered by practice. Similarly, sadhana bhakti is there. We engage our senses, we engage our mind with some favorable attitude towards Krishna, towards the Lord. And when we do those activities, slowly and gradually, that bhava, that longing for Krishna actually appears, that becomes uncovered within our heart. We also gave you another analogy of a person who has lost his memory because of maybe some accident or something. And the way to revive the memory of that person is mainly to bring that person to the places where he was or she was in the past. And when the person comes back to those same places where he was in the past, that brings some stimulus within the mind of that person, and the person slowly and gradually starts to recollect about his previous life. So those were the analogies we discussed. Then we discussed that sadhana bhakti, the definition was done with senses to achieve bhav, and it is already present. Now we discussed there are two further sadhana bhakti types. One is Vaidhi sadhana, and the second one is Raganuga sadhana bhakti. And as we introduce these two new terms, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and Raganuga sadhana bhakti, we try to understand the differences between the two. So Vaidhi sadhana, the drive is external. Drive is external means that somebody from outside, like our spiritual master or the injunctions of the Shastra or the instructions of the Shastra are actually becoming the uh, more driving force for us to carry out these activities. So the person has faith uh, in the Shastra, and uh, when the person has this faith in the Shastra, then he tries to follow the instruction of the Shastra. So that is Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. But Raganuga sadhana bhakti is after carrying out Vaidhi sadhana bhakti for some time, there arises a natural taste to do all these activities. Like, for example, in the beginning, a devotee might be waking up in the morning, attending Mangalarti, uh, doing deity worship, and other activities only because he is asked to do or he is supposed to do. And there is no real natural taste for the devotee to wake up in the morning. Sometimes the devotee may have to put an alarm to wake up at a particular time in the morning. But what happens in the Ragunaga sadhana bhakti, a natural taste has already arisen or have awakened in the heart of the devotee. Now he does not need an alarm clock to wake up early in the morning. He naturally awakes at the right time. He doesn't need to be pushed and repeatedly asked to wake up on time and so on. He's self-driven. He wakes up all on its own, takes a bath and get ready and do these Mangalarti, do the chanting of the japa and so on. So there is a natural liking already now in the heart of the devotee that drives him to do the sadhana bhakti. So these are called Vaidhi sadhana and Raganuga sadhana. Now here one point I would like to mention that Raganuga sadhana bhakti, there is a natural attraction towards doing sadhana bhakti. It is different from bhava bhakti. Raganuga bhakti is actually sadhana bhakti, which is the type 1, but it is different from bhava bhakti. Bhava bhakti means where there is a direct realization of Krishna. The intensity of understanding of Krishna is much more deeper compared to what it is there in Raganuga sadhana. So there's a difference between Raganuga sadhana bhakti and bhava bhakti. That is something which we should be aware. Sometimes devotees confuse between Raganuga sadhana and bhava bhakti. So bhava bhakti is having a more intense direct realization of Krishna, and Raganuga sadhana bhakti is having a natural taste to execute sadhana bhakti. That these two points we should understand properly. Then we gave you the definition of Vaidhi sadhana, another definition. So far we have given you a definition in chapter number 2 of sadhana bhakti. Now, two types of sadhana, Vaidhi sadhana, Raganuga sadhana. Now, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, we are giving the definition. And we mentioned it is not due to natural attraction, but it is done as an obligation. And obligation to what? Obligation of scriptures and guru or our spiritual master. So that's what the definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti was. Then, in order to explain this definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, Srila Rupa Goswami had given several references. So we are not going in our summary or in our revision on all those references. But one reference is, I would say, was very important, and we should try to uh, remember that reference at least. And that was always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. All rules and regulations are subordinate to this one rule. So what we understood here, why is this a supporting reference for Vaidhi sadhana bhakti? See, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, we understood that we do it in the definition, we do it not because of natural attraction, but because as an obligation. But ultimate purpose of doing this sadhana bhakti is mainly to achieve bhava, achieve remembrance of Krishna. So the focus is mostly in Vaidhi sadhana is to follow rules and regulations. But ultimately, the purpose of following these rules and regulations is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So if there are any rules and regulations in the scriptures, we are following those rules and regulations in the scripture, but that is not leading us to remembrance of Krishna, or we are following any regulations, any prohibitions mentioned in the scriptures, but if we are following those prohibitions, we are still forgetting Krishna, then the purpose of these rules and regulation is actually not served. So that is why we need to remember the chief principle is always remember Krishna, but never forget Krishna. All rules and regulations are subordinate to this one rule. Finally, we discussed Vaidhi Bhakti can provide both material benefits and highest result of Krishna Prem. So sometimes people think when they are doing bhakti that it is all about achieving the highest benefit of Krishna Prem, going to spiritual world, and so on and so forth. But bhakti actually takes care of even our material benefits also. Although the devotee does not hanker for material benefits, the Lord Himself fulfills any material desire the devotee might have. So that is what the beauty of Vaidhi Bhakti is, that you can satisfy your material needs. You don't need to go to Karma Kand, or you don't need to go to any other following of Vedic rituals, Vedic ceremonies, which are mostly towards providing material benefits. But at the same time, we can also achieve the highest result, which is the Krishna Prem. So with that, the summary is there. Primarily, the two most important definitions we studied in the previous class was the definition of sadhana bhakti and two types of sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi and Raganuga, and then definition of Vaidhi bhakti. That's what we have discussed. Sadhana bhakti definition is it is done with the senses to achieve bhava, and bhava is already present. And definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti is it is done not because of natural attraction, but as an obligation. So like that, if you keep on revising these two definitions side by side and try to focus your mind on the difference between the two, the understanding will be much more deeper. Okay, now once again coming back to the bigger picture, Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, there are 4 divisions of the book. Eastern division, Western division, Northern division, Southern division. We have studied that. We are primarily discussing Eastern division. This is the Eastern division. Eastern division has 4 chapters. Each of these chapters are known as waves. The first chapter in the Eastern division is Samanya Bhakti. In the Samanya Bhakti, we have discussed several topics so far. And these topics have been Mangalacharan, we have discussed. We have discussed the definition of Uttama Bhakti, and then we have discussed 6 qualities of Uttama Bhakti. So that all we have discussed in wave number 1 or chapter number 1. Then we have started the discussion on Sadhana Bhakti. As I mentioned in the previous class also, this is a very long chapter. And in the previous class, we had discussed only first 13 verses of Sadhana Bhakti, where primarily we have discussed the definition of Sadhana Bhakti and Vaidhi Bhakti, like that. So it is still some time before we discuss Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. Now, okay, this is the Sadhana Bhakti chapter. So we have discussed till verse number 13. So we have discussed different types of Uttama Bhakti, Sadhana, Bhava, Prema. Then we discussed the definition of Sadhana Bhakti, then different types of Sadhana Bhakti, then the definition of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Today we will be discussing qualification of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, qualification of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, Adhikar. Now, who can do Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti? Who is qualified to do Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti? Different types of adhikaris or different type of people or devotees who are qualified to do it. Then we will also cover Bhakti surpasses Mukti and gradations of Mukti till verse number 59. So we, in the previous class, we completed till verse number 13 of chapter number 2. Today we will target to finish starting from verse number 14 till verse number 59. So it might sound that we have to do a lot of covering, but most of these verses in the end are actually references from various scriptures, and we will try to finish them in a very short time, because mostly the message is very, very common in all of these verses. Okay. Now, just to give you an idea where we are in the Nectar of Devotion book, which Prabhupada had written as a summary study, we have covered the introduction, we have covered chapter 1, we have covered chapter 2. We just now revised in this class chapter number 2. We will today start chapter number 3, eligibility of the candidate for accepting devotional service. So 14th till 29. Primarily, 95% of time we will dedicate or devote on chapter number 3. In chapter number 4 is full of references from Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures. And all of these references have a very, very common theme. So we will just mention to you the common theme and maybe narrate to you for your benefit some few choice verses. You can read other verses in your own time, which should not be very difficult. So that is what our target today, chapter number 3 and chapter number 4. Okay. As I mentioned to you today, the objective is to start from verse number 14, and the main theme of the discussion from verse number 14 till verse number 21 is who is qualified for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, or rather, what is the qualification of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, and different type of devotees who qualify for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, how can we categorize them? This is the beginning category, this is the medium category, this is the advanced category, like that. So, in our previous classes, we have already discussed what causes bhakti. And we discussed this briefly, that bhakti in our previous life only causes bhakti. Bhakti is independent. Only bhakti can cause bhakti. So, if we have done some bhakti in our previous life, then it is possible that we will continue to do that bhakti in our present life also. That raises a question that when actually it all starts, it actually starts for the first time when a person or a living entity comes in contact with a devotee by chance, and by coming in contact with a devotee, the living entity becomes attracted towards the devotee, become attracted towards the behavior of the devotee, become attracted towards the message that the devotee is trying to explain. There could be several reasons, but the first time when the bhakti starts is that we might come in contact with a devotee who can create that bhakti seed within our heart, which starts to grow. So devotional service is causeless. Causeless means there is no other cause other than bhakti for devotional service. It is independent. There is no prerequisites for taking up sadhana bhakti. There is no prerequisites other than that you might have done some bhakti in the past. There is no other prerequisite. Even if you have not done any bhakti in the past also, then also the bhakti can arise, provided you come in contact with another devotee. We do not need any knowledge or detachment, jnana or vairagya. We don't need any jnana, any knowledge, or any renunciation, any vairagya for starting up sadhana bhakti. Attraction to serve Krishna is the only requirement, and this attraction to serve Krishna comes by association of a devotee. That's how this attraction to serve Krishna comes up or develops within our heart. So this is the qualification for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Now let us look at the definition of who is qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti, who is the Adhikari. Qualified means Adhikari. Who is the Adhikari for Vaidhi Bhakti? So Srila Rupa Goswami gives one definition or one verse to give you the requirement of who is qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti. Now Vaidhi Bhakti is something, as we understood from the definition, it is not natural, but it arises because we have some attraction towards the Lord. That is what Vaidhi Bhakti we studied short while ago. Now, the definition says, Yah kenapi ati bhagyena jata shraddhosya sevane nati sakto na vairagya bhag asyam adhikari yasau. Yah kenapi ati bhagyena, by impressions arising from the association of devotees, a fortunate person who. So the first line is Ya kenapi ati bhagyena, ati bhagyena. Ati bhagyena means a fortunate one by mercy of a bona fide guru and Krishna gets bhakti seed. Bona fide guru means somebody who understands bhakti properly. A fortunate one by mercy of bona fide guru and Krishna gets bhakti seed, the seed of bhakti, by impressions arising from the association of devotees. A fortunate person who, now what happens when he associates with the devotees? Jat Shraddhosya Sevane. He develops this faith in Lord's service. He develops this faith, develops this Shraddha that he should serve the Lord. He should do something for the Lord. Then there are several other qualifications, several other requirements who is qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti. Na ati sakto, na vairagya bhag, na ati asakto, na ati asakto. Na ati asakto means it is neither too attached, na vairagya bhag, neither too detached. So what do we understand by vairagya here? Or ati asakto means? Ati asakto means too attached means attached to material benefits, karma phala, or material enjoyment. It is neither too attached, too much attachment for material enjoyment, or too detached. Too detached means there are two things we should understand here when we talk about Vairagya. Vairagya actually means here we should not have any false renunciation. False renunciation means, for example, I am habitual of smoking cigarettes, or somebody is habitual of smoking cigarettes. And false renunciation would mean that he is leaving the smoking of cigarette maybe for 7 days. He is forcing himself, or somebody is forcing oneself to stop smoking for 7 days. That is false renunciation. False renunciation means that we have forcefully stopped smoking cigarette, but in our heart we have this hankering for smoking cigarette. That is called false renunciation. So Vairagya here means we should not have false renunciation. We should not have a renunciation which we are forcing on ourselves too much. But detachment from material enjoyment favorable. Detachment from material enjoyment favorable would mean that the person actually believes that if we do material enjoyment, it is not good for my bhakti. That conviction, that little faith, that material enjoyment cannot give me happiness. Material enjoyment cannot make me advance in spiritual life. That is actually a twofold definition of Vairagya. We will discuss more about Vairagya in coming references. So, it is neither too attached and nor too detached. And this person is actually qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti. So this definition is coming from Srila Rupa Goswami. Chapter number 3, paragraph number 1. If you see Nectar of Devotion, this is the definition Srila Rupa Goswami gives for who is qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti. Now, this happens because of good fortune. This is what this good fortune does is it creates a faith that we should serve the Lord, and the mental state should be that the person should not be too much attached to material sense enjoyment, neither too much detached to material sense enjoyment. So that is what it means. After giving this definition, as usual, Srila Rupa Goswami is quoting a reference, and now he has chosen to give a reference from Srimad Bhagavatam. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam actually is spoken by Lord Krishna himself. Lord Krishna is speaking this verse, where he is explaining what is the quality or what is the eligibility for Vaidhi Bhakti. Lord Krishna is saying, Yadrachaya matkatha jata shraddhastu yapuman na nirvinno na atisakto bhakti yogosya siddhitaha yadrachaya mat kathadau yadrachaya. So this word you will find several times. It will appear in Vedic text. Yadrachya. Yadrachya means if by good fortune, or which in other words means by association of devotees. If by good fortune, that is by association of devotees, mat katha dau. Mat means, because this is spoken by Lord Krishna, mat here means Lord Krishna. Mat katha dau. Jat shraddha. Shraddha means faith. One develops faith in what? Mat katha dau. Mat katha dau means hearing and chanting of my glories. Puman means a person. If some person, because of the shraddha, because of the faith, if some person develops some faith in my katha, in my discussion, because of some good fortune, and this person is na nirvinno, na atisakto, and he is neither too disgusted or nor too attached to material life. So he is there in material life, but while in material life, neither he is too detached from material life that I will not eat this, I will not go there, I will not keep relationship with my family members. Neither too detached nor too attached. Too attached means I only want this enjoyment, I only want uh, sense gratification, I only want to have more power, more money, more fame. Neither he is too attached nor too detached. That is the state of mind. So, such a person can achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. Bhakti yogo sya siddhida. He achieves perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. So, this is what you can see a reference Srila Rupa Goswami is giving to explain the qualification, to explain the eligibility for a person who is now entering the practice of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Now, the next slide is on the same verse, the 15th verse that we discussed just now. The next slide is on the same verse, but this reference has been given by Srila Jiva Goswami. The previous reference was given by Srila Rupa Goswami, and in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a commentary has been written by Srila Jiva Goswami, and while writing that commentary on this verse, Srila Jiva Goswami quotes another verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which will give you even more details who is qualified for doing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So here, Srila Jiva Goswami gives this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is 27th and 28th verse. Now please see how more details and more specific items are mentioned in this reference that Srila Jeev Goswami is giving. Having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories. So the same thing was mentioned in the previous verse also, that the devotee should awaken faith in the narration of my glories of Lord Krishna. Being disgusted with all prescribed activities of Varnashram. Now, this is additional detail which is mentioned here. Being disgusted with all prescribed activities of Varnashram. Now, what is Varnashram? And what do we do in Varnashram? In Varnashram, we are mostly uh, engaged, or we are mostly focusing our sadhana or our thoughts in fulfilling our duties. Now we know there are 4 varnas and 4 ashramas, and each varna has its own set of duties. Each ashrama has its own set of duties. For example, if I'm a Kshatriya varna, so my duty is mainly to protect the society. And if I'm in the Grahast ashrama, my duty is mainly towards my wife, my children, my parents, my family, and maybe the society, etc., etc. So these are some prescribed activities given in Varnashram. Now, this person who is awakened faith in the narration of my glories, being disgusted with all prescribed activities of Varnashram. Disgusted means he now starts to understand that these are not the prime objective of my life. This is not the prime objective of my life. Although he lives in Varnashrama, he performs those duties to the best of its capacity, but in the heart, the practitioner understands that this is not the prime sadhana that is incumbent upon me to perform to achieve the highest result, which is Krishna Prem. That's what he understands. Then, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery. So this is very important realization that person should have. This person may have already in his material life have experienced that whenever some sense gratification is there, that is temporary. That doesn't last for long. And ultimately, many times this actually leads to misery. Knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment. So this is also, you can see additional detail. So the person has this understanding that enjoyment, sense gratification leads to misery. But at the same time, he cannot leave some of the sense enjoyment because he is a little bit attached to some sense enjoyment. So he cannot leave everything, or he cannot renounce all the sense enjoyment. But in his heart, the person knows that sense enjoyment is not going to take me to the prime destination, which is Krishna Prem. That he understands. My devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction, even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment. So this devotee sometimes do get engaged in sense enjoyment. Sometimes he go to watch a movie. Sometimes he goes to eat some nice food stuff in the outside restaurant. Sometimes he does. But he understands that if he's doing these activities, actually these are not going to take me to the final destination. My devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, something very similar that we discussed here. And he sincerely repents such activities. He sincerely repents these activities. So although he goes and does all these sense enjoyment momentarily, sometimes occasionally, but whenever he does those sense enjoyment, he repents that why I did this. Actually, I could have spent my time more in the service of the Lord. So this is the state of the mind, and you can see this verse gives you a very nice understanding of the state of mind of person who is, as per the definition by the scriptures, by the acharyas, is qualified for doing Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Now, let us also here spend some time, few minutes, to understand, is renunciation a prerequisite Renunciation means vairagya. And in these definitions, we have seen again and again, like for example, we saw this definition by Rup Goswami, na ati sakto na vairagya bhag. So here again, here the word vairagya comes, which means he should not be too detached. Again, in the 15th verse, we saw na nirvinno na ati sakto. Nirvinno means disgusted with material life, means detached with material life. Then here also we saw that uh, uh, still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment. Huh? So the point is, many times people think that in order to do some spiritual practice, in order to do some spiritual activity, we must be renounced in our mind. We must be renounced in our mind. But here we understand that renunciation actually is not required to begin bhakti. That is not required. Actually, too much renunciation can be an impediment to bhakti. This point is very important. Please try to understand this. Too much renunciation can be an impediment to bhakti. Too much renunciation means what? Let us try to understand that. Too much renunciation means we don't want, we have completely made ourselves detached, cut off from regular life. Say, for example, too much detachment could mean that we are not living in our house. We are probably living under a tree. Too much renunciation. Or we have cut off all our family relationship. Even when those family relationship, when those people come in front of us, we don't feel any emotion for them. Too much detachment, too much renunciation. In fact, too much renunciation can be an impediment to bhakti. Now the reason is, you remember the definition of sadhana bhakti? The definition of sadhana bhakti is we need to engage our senses and our mind. Senses means the knowledge acquiring senses, working senses, and our mind. Man, Gyan Indriya or Karma Indriya. We need to engage in the in some activities, then it is known as sadhana bhakti. And then, so if we are too detached from emotional and sensual activities, emotion, and then we also discussed we need some positive emotion towards the Lord. So emotion is very much required. We need emotion towards the Lord. We need emotion towards the devotees of the Lord. We should have a liking, a loving propensity, an affectionate propensity towards the Lord, towards the devotees. That kind of a emotion we need. If we are too detached from emotional and sensual activities, sensual activities means we don't use our knowledge acquiring senses. For example, somebody gives me a prasad, a sweet, and I say that I don't want to eat this opulent food, and I reject it. But the devotee who is offering me is a sweet, a prasad offered to the Lord. So we are showing too much detachment. So, but that is not advised here. If we are too detached from emotional and sensual activities, we will not be inclined to perform bhakti, because bhakti entails use of senses and emotions. Bhakti entails use of senses and emotions. Use of senses and emotions for doing what? To do some activities with the positive emotion towards Lord, towards his devotees. That is what we discussed about bhakti, isn't it? Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. Uttama Bhakti definition, that's what we studied. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. So we need to engage those senses and emotions. So too much renunciation is actually an impediment, and renunciation actually is not required to begin bhakti. What is required to begin bhakti is the attraction to serve the Lord. And that attraction to serve the Lord comes from where? Ati bhagyena. Ati bhagyena means connection with the devotees of the Lord. When we connect with the devotees of the Lord, that attraction to serve the Lord actually awakens in our heart. So now we are moving to the next theme. Just now what we discussed was the qualification required to do bhakti, and the prime qualification to required bhakti is some attraction towards the service of the Lord. Now, different type of adhikaris. Now we have discussed the adhikar. What is the adhikar? Who is qualified? What is that qualification? And based on that qualification, we have different level of adhikaris. Beginner, uh, medium person, advanced person, like that. So there are different adhikaris. So for Vaidhi Bhakti, different adhikaris are there. And we discussed in verse number 6 in the previous class. We discussed in the definition of Vaidhi Bhakti. What was the definition of Vaidhi Bhakti? The definition of Vaidhi Bhakti was that it should be done with some obligation towards scriptures and spiritual master. That's what we discussed about Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi means Vidhi. So Vidhi means some process, and that process is coming from scriptures or spiritual master. So this was the definition we discussed in the previous class in verse number 6. These are inspired by the teachings of the scriptures. So the adhikaris are also decided how much faith and knowledge a person has developed in the scriptures and in the guidelines or in the guidance of the teacher, of the guru. Therefore, our faith and knowledge in scriptures is the major consideration in determining our eligibility to advance. So, adhikaris means a person doing Vaidhi Bhakti at a beginning stage, at some more advanced stage, and the most advanced stage, like that. So, how do we decide? How do we decide the person is at the beginning stage? How do we decide the person is at the medium stage? How do we decide the person is at the advanced stage? That decision actually comes from faith and knowledge in scriptures. Why? Because the whole definition of Vaidhi Bhakti means following the scriptures. And if a person is following and having faith in scriptures at a very deep level, at a very advanced level, he not only has very deep faith in the scriptures, but also has a very deep knowledge in the scriptures. Such a person is considered to be a very advanced stage Vaidhi Bhakta. Advanced stage Vaidhi Bhakta. He is following this Vidhi and Vidhan in a very advanced way. And now, depending upon this criteria, we classify them as Uttama Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Kanishta Adhikari. So all these names would sound very familiar to all of you. We have discussed about Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanishta Adhikaris in our classes on Nectar of Instruction. So should not be a very difficult one. So we will discuss about Uttama, Madhyama Adhikari, Kanishta Adhikari in a very quick, in a table form. The next slide. So 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th verses of Bhaktivedanta Sindhu is now clubbed here in one small table to give you an idea of what is the difference between Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama. As I mentioned to you, the criteria is the faith and knowledge in the scriptures. Guru also follows the scriptures. The advanced devotee also follows the scriptures. So scripture is the topmost. Faith in the scripture would mean what? Here the word faith means convinced that goal of life is to please Krishna. We should abandon all other desires. So this is the faith. These adhikaris should have Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttama. All these three adhikaris should have this faith that the goal of life is to please Krishna. And any other desire we should try to minimize and ultimately reduce to zero. Anya abhilashita shunyam, like what we discussed in the definition of Uttama Bhakti. At this stage of Vaidhi Bhakti, the person has some abhilashita, has some abhilasha, has some desires. But ultimate goal of Uttama Bhakti, from Vaidhi Bhakti at the beginning stage in order to reach the topmost stage of pure devotion, the desire should be abandoned, and this conviction that goal of life is to please Krishna should grow more and more and more. Now, Uttama Adhikari's faith actually is very strong. He is fully convinced, and not only is convinced, but he can convince others also. He can convince others also who come in contact with this Uttamadhikari. And the knowledge of Uttamadhikari, knowledge of what? Knowledge of scriptures. Knowledge of scriptures is very strong. Because his knowledge is very strong, he can actually defeat any opposing opinion. Somebody puts any other opinion from the scriptures, the person is very well versed, very well read about the scriptures. He can quickly present an argument and defeat the opposing opinion. Madhyama Adhikari is somewhere at the middle level. His faith is strong. Faith is strong means that the goal of life is to please Krishna. That faith is very strong, and he is convinced about his faith. But when it comes to knowledge, he has a very good knowledge, reasonably well knowledgeable, but can't always defeat the opposing opinion. So if he is invited to some discussion, some debate, sometimes he can present an argument, sometimes he cannot present an argument properly from the scriptures. Now, if he is not able to present an argument from the scripture, that doesn't mean that the faith of Madhyama Adhikari is lower down. His faith still continues to be strong. He simply understands that I am not able to present an argument. Maybe if I go back and refer to the scriptures, I can once again recollect or present an argument, but on the spot I cannot present an argument to defeat the opposing view. On the bottom level is Kanishta Adhikari. Kanishta's Adhikari's faith is weak, Komal Shraddha, and it is easily swayed. Easily swayed means if somebody presents an opposing argument, that Shraddha of that Kanishta Adhikari is disturbed. And what it means is that this Kanishta Adhikari may not be very, very convinced or will not perform the bhakti in a very confident way, maybe for coming some time, for maybe a couple of months, few weeks, and so on. But that does not mean that this Kanishta Adhikari will leave devotional service altogether. That does not mean that. So Kanishta Adhikari, like for example, we are going on a road and there is some speed breaker comes, and that speed breaker is something which is very, very difficult, very complicated. Then the car is actually comes off track. We are going on the main road, but because some very big obstacle has come, the car actually comes off track. So the Kanishta Adhikari Bhakti comes off track. It gets disturbed, it gets imbalanced, and it continues. In order to restore that balance, the Kanishta Adhikari takes some time. So that's the level of faith in Kanishta Adhikari. His knowledge is weak, and he cannot offer arguments to the opposing opinion. That's how the Kanishta Adhikari is there. So, what we have discussed so far, we have discussed about qualification. The main qualification is attraction towards the Lord, which comes from good fortune, ati bhagyena. And we discussed about the different type of adhikaris. The basis of this adhikari is faith and knowledge in the scriptures, because Vedic sadhana bhakti is all about following scriptures, and the people, our spiritual master, who are also teaching scriptures and following scriptures. That is where. So the quality and the adhikar is also decided based on the same criteria. Now, after understanding the three adhikaris, Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama, there are other gradations also below these three adhikaris. So we have Uttama, then we have Madhyama, and we have Kanishta. So below Kanishta, there are other gradations, and these people are known as Sukritinas. What are they known as? They are known as Sukritinas. Su means good, Kriti means activity. So these people are Sukritinas, means they have done some good activities, some pious activities, and they are categorized into four categories, four Sukritinas. And this topic is covered in two verses, 20th and 21st in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Such people can eradicate their tendencies and become qualified for pure bhakti by associating with pure devotees. Now, what is the difference between Sukritinas and the Adhikaris? Adhikaris are convinced, their faith is that goal of life is to please Krishna. They are convinced that goal of life is to please Krishna. That is what their faith is. But Adhikaris, they are not convinced about this particular aspect. They are more attracted towards other aspects. That is why they are not called as Adhikaris, but they are called as Sukritinas. But if these people can eradicate their tendencies, their present tendencies, and become qualified for pure bhakti by associating with pure devotees, they can jump from being a Sukritina to a Adhikari, a Kanishta Adhikari or a Madhyam Adhikari or a Uttam Adhikari. So they can change this track from Sukritinas to becoming a Adhikari. What is Sukriti and or piety? We discussed just now. Pious acts done in previous life or this life. Punya karma. So if we do some punya karma, if we do some piety, some pious acts, that is something we are accumulating sukritis. We are accumulating. And the real sukriti is that we associate with devotees that inspires bhakti. In case we have done some bhakti in the previous life, knowingly or unknowingly, that is we accumulate it as a sukriti. So that is sukriti. For example, we don't have any intention to go to the temple, but somebody who was going to the temple also took us away, and we just went with the person to the temple. We bowed down before the deities of the Lord. We took some prasad, or we were walking on the street and we saw them, a Hare Krishna party doing some kirtan. We got attracted towards the kirtan. We heard the kirtan. We had some appreciation for the devotee who are doing that kirtan. So we are, by doing these activities, by thinking like that, we accumulate some sukritis in our heart. That is called sukriti. Now there are four types of sukritinas, and we have discussed them in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse number 16. And what are these four sukritinas? Artho, Artharthi, Jigyasu, and Jnani. Hope you will remember. Artha means distressed. Artharthi, the word comes from Arth. Arth means some wealth, some finance. Artharthi means one who is looking after some wealth, who is trying to acquire some wealth. Jigyasu means inquisitive. Inquisitive means he is now more inquisitive about the transcendence. He now is not only interested in the present world, but he is interested in the world beyond this world, Parlok, or other celestial realms. This is called a person called Jigyasu. He may not be inquiring about the topmost Golok Udham Vrindavan or topmost spiritual realm, but he is inquisitive about some other realms besides this world. Then Jnani. Jnani is wise. Jnani is somebody who has now who has now understood to a great degree that this material world is a place of misery. He is a spirit soul, and actually he needs to come out from this material world and get rid of these material miseries and achieve Brahman level. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma means uh, getting rid of all the anarthas from our heart: lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, lakpai. All that lakpai is gone from the heart. He's more interested in that. So he's understanding is a spirit soul. He is eternal, and he needs to get rid of these impurities in the heart to achieve a Brahman stage, achieve uh, a liberated stage, moksha stage. So these are the four type of sukritinas: artha, artharthi, jigyasu, and jnani. And for each of these sukritinas, we have an example from the scriptures. Like, for example, we have the story of Gajendra mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, who is an example of an Arth Bhakta. Dhruva Maharaj is an example of Artharthi Bhakta. And those sages and saints who gathered in the Naimisharanya forest to hear from the pure devotee of the Lord, Srila Sud Goswami, they are, the Naimisharanya sages are categorized under the category of Jigyasu. And the four Kumaras, the Chatush Kumaras, they are categorized as Jnani. They were more after impersonal liberation and Brahman than the Bhakti of the Lord. So these are the four Kumaras. Let us, from this slide, try to understand the subtle differences between each of these characters who have been put into the category of Sukritinas. So Gajendra was a king of the elephants, and one fine day while he was taking a bath in a river, a crocodile captured his leg. And there was a fight between Gajendra and the crocodile. Gajendra, because he was the animal of the land, but he was having this fight with the crocodile in water, was not able to utilize his full capacity. The crocodile was in his natural environment, that is water. So he proved to be much more powerful than Gajendra. Slowly, Gajendra started losing its strength, and crocodile started to gain hold upon that fight that happened between both of them. In that artha situation, in that situation of helplessness, in that distressed situation, Gajendra remembered about the Supreme Lord. Because he had done some bhakti in his previous life, he had acquired some sukriti from his previous life. Because of that sukriti, in that distressed condition, he remembered the Lord. And he prayed for protection. He picked up one lotus flower in his trunk and raised to the Lord as if he is offering that flower to the Lord. And then Lord came and protected Gajendra and so on. So this distressed Gajendra got attracted by the Lord's sweetness and gave up the desire for relief. So his main objective for prayer was relief. His prayer was mainly to get rid of the distress that he was actually facing at the hand of that crocodile. So he was not coming there for attraction for Krishna, but mainly to save himself for that relief. But when he got that relief, when he got attracted by the sweetness of the Lord, he gave up that desire for relief. His desire changed. His desire changed from artha, from getting distress, from getting relief from the distress. His desire changed mainly purely to serve the Lord. That is how his Sukritina, he transferred himself from Sukritina stage to the Vaidhi Bhakti stage. Then Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj wanted his father's kingdom. So there is a story there. We will not go detail into the story, but it so happened that Dhruva was a child of King Uttanpad, but because of the stepmother, Dhruva could not sit on the father's lap, on his own father's lap. He could not sit on that lap. And that happened mainly because his stepmother, Suruchi, wanted her own son to sit on the lap of Uttanpad. And Dhruva felt very, very rejected and very insulted. And because of that insult, he uh, decided that he would go to the forest, he would do tapasya, and actually he would request for a kingdom greater than the kingdom of his own father. So his incentive to go to the forest and do tapasya was not for attraction of the Lord, but the incentive was to get a bigger kingdom than his own father. However, when he was successful in his tapasya, in his austerity, the Lord appeared, and when he saw the darshan of the Lord, he forget his material benediction that he wanted a kingdom greater than the kingdom of his own father. And he once again progressed from becoming a Sukritina to a Bhakta, a pure Bhakta. Then the Naimisharanya sages. These are the sages who assembled to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Sut Goswami in Naimisharanya. They are being discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam in great detail. So these people were jigyasu about Krishna. So all those sages that gathered in Naimisharanya forest were not pure devotees. Some were bhaktas, or some were transcendentalists of some degree, some were transcendental of some degree. Different level of transcendentalists were there who gathered there to hear about Lord Krishna. But when they heard Sut Goswami, who was a pure devotee, they gave up their desire for knowing about Swargalok. So they had this desire to know more about this Swargalok, the heavens. They gave up their desire. And 4 Kumaras. So these Kumaras are Sanak, Sanatan, Sanand, and Sanat Kumar. And these are categorized in Jnanis. So they had this desire for liberation. But by Lord's mercy, by Lord's causeless mercy, what happened was the tulsi leaves that were offered on the lotus feet of the Lord. So the fragrance of that tulsi leaf entered into the nostrils of these 4 Kumaras. So as soon as they smelled that fragrance of tulsi leaves, their attraction for the Lord awakened in their heart. So like that, you can see how these 4 Sukritinas, as exemplified by Gajendra, Dhruva, the sages of Naimisharanya, and 4 Kumaras, their intention, their prime intention was something else, but because of some causeless mercy, because of some attraction towards the Lord, created by the devotees of the Lord or by the Lord himself, they actually left their primary motive of Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu, and Jnani and became the devotee of the Lord. This table gives you a little more difference between Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu, and Jnani, the 4 Sukritinas. So this is in an order. Artha at the bottommost level, Artharthi maybe together with Artha, a little slight difference. Jigyasu superior to both Artha and Artharthi, but Jnani is best of all 4 of them. And you would remember in 7th chapter also, we have discussed where Lord Krishna says that all 4 of them are Mahatmas, but out of these 4, Jnani is, I like him the most. Why I like him the most? Because he approaches me without any material benefits, without aspiring for any material benefits. That's why I really like Jnani compared to other 3. So Artha desires distress, relief from grief. So this is something which is a very short-term solution. Grief is something which is very, if somebody is feeling grief, he wants quick relief from grief. This is a short-term solution. Artharthi is something, if he will get some artha in a longer term, he will feel some deeper sense of happiness. So desire for attainment of happiness. It's a more long-term request. Not today, but in future you can give me artha, where I will utilize that artha to feel myself more happy. Jigyasu is something which is superior to both artha and artharthi. He inquires with a desire for deeper solace from grief and deeper happiness. So he's now more convinced about the transcendental nature of the world, or sorry, temporary nature of the world, and he also believes in the existence of some transcendence. Now he is more inquiring from that perspective. So I don't want to get actually relief from artha or distress. Also, I don't need something which is to do with artha, more opulence, but I need something more deeper, more superior happiness, more long-lasting happiness. The desire for deeper solace from grief and deeper happiness. And Jnani is somebody who has knowledge of Lord's power or sweetness or both. These people are not impersonalists. See, the word Jnani can have two possible meanings. Jnani also means somebody who is only truly focusing on the impersonal Brahmajyoti, to merge in the impersonal aspect of the Lord, Nirakar. That is Jnani. But Jnani also means one who is knowledgeable about the Lord. So these people are primarily have this inclination towards impersonal liberation, but they also have some attraction towards the Lord. That they also have, but primarily their objective is more towards impersonal liberation. So that is why it is mentioned one who has knowledge about Lord's power or Lord's sweetness or both. But still they are not impersonals because they have some knowledge about the Lord. So the Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that this Jnani is actually the best of all. And all these Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu and Jnani, they are interrelated. Artha and Artharthi, they are primarily in the material conception of life because they want relief from distress and they want money. And this is all, distress and money is related with material body, nothing spiritual about it. Jigyasu is a little bit better than two, but still on a material platform. But Jnani is actually the best of all. He understands that he is a spiritual being and he is actually eternally related in some way to the Supreme Lord. That's what the understanding of Jnani. Now, how all these four Sukritinas are related with each other. Say, if an Artha is feeling distressed and going to the Supreme Lord for prayers, get me relief, he acquires some Sukriti. Similarly, Artharthi also acquires some Sukriti. Jigyasu also acquires some Sukriti. So ultimately, they keep on acquiring Sukritis, and when the Sukritis actually become sufficient enough, and that can take actually many lifetimes. So that is why these people, Artha, Artharthi or Jigyasu, they can become Jnanis after many births and attain Krishna through devotee association. Such people are very rare. Like that, they can progress from Artha stage to Jnani stage, or Artharthi stage to Jnani stage, or Jigyasu stage to Jnani stage. Jnani is somebody who is not seeking any material benefit, but it is wise because he studied a lot of scriptures. So that is why he is known as Jnani. Now you can see, so what we have discussed three adhikaris based on their faith and knowledge in the scriptures, Uttama, Madhyama and Kanishta. But even below Kanishta, there are Sukritinas. Sukritinas are Arth, Artharthi, Jigyasu and Jnani. But when these Sukritinas come in contact with the devotees or somehow come in contact with bhakti or any environment of bhakti, they actually can get themselves promote from Sukritina stage to the Adhikari stage. So this fifth example is given here also in Nectar of Devotion. Four examples we have discussed in the previous slide. Gajendra, Dhruva, the sages of Naimisharanya and four Kumaras. Now the fifth example is given to differentiate between Sukritina progressing from Sukritina stage to Bhakti versus somebody who is not a Sukritina, who is simply a normal person, just came in contact with the devotees and the Bhakti started. There is nothing to do with the going to the Lord for removing distress, going to the Lord for giving more money, giving to the Lord for inquisitiveness and so on. There is no question about like that. But simply because of the causeless mercy of the devotees, there is no reason for it. Just like that, it happened someday. Causeless mercy of the devotees. Narad Muni, who is explaining his story in Srimad Bhagavatam, is mentioning that before becoming Narad Muni in his previous life, he was a Dasi Putra. He was a son of a maid servant. And to this house of the maid servant, this Dasi, actually came some Bhaktivedantis, some people who are pure devotees. And they stayed at their place, and the Dasi, his mother, Narad Muni's mother, served these devotees with great care and attention. Also, Narad Muni, as a child, as a 5-year-old child, as you can see in the picture, he also served these devotees with great care and attention. You can see here, Narad Muni is removing the food plates, the plates where these Bhaktivedantis have eaten short while ago. So he's serving these devotees by removing the food plates, and that's how, just by serving the devotees, just by associating with these devotees for 4 months, he acquired that taste of bhakti. He acquired that attraction towards the Lord. He attained knowledge and devotion by the mercy of devotees known as Bhaktivedantas. And finally, he started developing his Vedi Bhakti step by step. So, just now we saw those 4 Sukritinas whose motive and intention is other than attraction towards the Lord. Now we are contrasting it with the story of Narad Muni, where the attraction towards the Lord was created by association of the pure devotees, by service of the pure devotees, that somehow got started and the person started performing Vedi Bhakti and ultimately became a pure devotee of the Lord, that is Narad Muni. So that is the 5th example. Now we will try to cover this fast. So more or less we have covered the subject matter of chapter number 3. That is the subject matter of chapter 3 so far. Now we will try to cover the verses from 22 to 59, which talks about Bhakti surpasses Mukti. Bhakti surpasses Mukti means, just now we discussed in the definition of qualification, we discussed that who is qualified for Vedi Bhakti? A person who is neither too attached or neither too detached. So, a question might arise in someone's heart that if a person already has some attachment for material sense enjoyment, then how such a person can actually reach to the stage of mukti, liberation? So the answer is given in the verses which are from 22 to 29. Actually, this is answered in verses from 22 to 25. And later on, from 26 till 29, references from Srimad Bhagavatam are given. Similarly, the whole of 4th chapter is full of references. From verse number 13, Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, till verse number 59, only references from the scriptures is given in chapter number 4. So let us see quickly what these verse number 22 till 25 is saying. So I was raising this question that when we studied about the qualification, the eligibility of doing Vedi Bhakti, we read that the person should not be too attached or too detached. And if a person has some attachment for material enjoyment, then how can such a person can acquire mukti, can acquire liberation, moksha? How can this happen? Because people in general have this idea that liberation or moksha is a very, very advanced stage. Certainly, it is an advanced stage. But if you do bhakti, you can even surpass mukti. You can easily achieve liberation, and you can even go beyond the joy of liberation, the bliss that you see in liberation, the happiness that you find in liberation. When you do bhakti, you can even move away from that joy of mukti. You can even go further. You can advance even further. So that misconception is kind of answered here, that despite that the practitioner still has some attachment for material enjoyment, but by doing bhakti, how is it possible to even reach or even surpass the stage of mukti? So here, Rup Goswami is mentioning a verse. This is composed by Rup Goswami. He is saying, Bhukti mukti spriha yavat pishachi hridi vartate tavat bhakti sukhasyatra katham abhyudayo bhavet katham abhyudayo bhavet. When the witches means pishachi. Pishachi means chudel, a witch. When the witches of desire for enjoyment, which is known as bhukti, and liberation, which is mukti, are present in the heart, how can the happiness of bhakti arise there? Tavad bhakti sukhasyatra. Katham means how. How can? Abhyudayo bhavet. Bhavet means happens. Abhyudayo means arise, awakens. So, like what we discussed, if there is already some desire for material enjoyment, and here material enjoyment is bhukti and mukti. Now you can ask why mukti is called as material enjoyment. I will explain here in the bottom part. Bhukti means material desires, earning more money, becoming more powerful, having more name, fame, etc. These are material desires. That is no question about it. There is no confusion, should not be any confusion about it. If you are having these kind of material desires, too much material desires, then these material desires can cover the desire for bhakti. That is why bhakti is known as pishachi. Pishachi is something, it is, you can say, ghost. Now, one of the objective of ghost, or one of the functions of ghost, is to possess. They haunt somebody. They possess the body of somebody. So similarly, bhakti is known as a pishachi, because if this desire for material sense enjoyment is there, it actually possesses the consciousness of the practitioner, and the practitioner forgets the real purpose of bhakti. So that is why it is compared to a pishachi. Similarly, mukti is also a pishachi. And why mukti is called a pishachi? Because in mukti, the practitioner has a desire, and that desire is also actually at a material platform. Why? The practitioner of mukti has a desire to free oneself from material anxiety. And what is this material anxiety? Lag pie, lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy. He wants to come from a material platform to a Brahman platform. Brahman platform means platform where there is no anartha in our heart. Lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy. So this desire for mukti, this desire to get rid of this material anxiety, lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, is also material in nature. And then what happens further is that when a person gets this liberation, he or she wants to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. He wants to become one with God. Becoming one with God is a very, very dangerous desire. Why? Everyone in this world wants to become big and big. If he has $1 million, he wants to earn $2 million. If he has a chief minister of a state, he wants to become a prime minister of a state. Like that, a person wants to become bigger and bigger in one's life. So the topmost desire could be that I want to become one with God. That is the could be a distraction of a person who is looking after mukti. So mukti is also pishachi. because this desire actually also uh, uh, can haunt a person, a practitioner, which can take him away from the practice of bhakti. Because bhukti and mukti are both self-centered, and mukti and the desire to become one with God is the you can say the extreme of a material desire. The, the farthest extreme somebody can think in this world as far as material desire is concerned, that is anxiety to or a desire to becoming one with God. And because these are self-centered, these are known as pishachi. So how this happiness of bhakti can arise if somebody has this desire of some material enjoyment? So that answer is given in verse number 23, 24, and 25. Rupa Goswami says, he's quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, he's saying, devotees do not desire liberation at all. Their minds and senses are captivated. There is a very strong attraction by the process of bhakti, such as hearing about Krishna's qualities through the influence of prema. So when these people, when these devotees hear about Krishna Katha, hear about Ram Katha, hear about literature like Srimad Bhagavatam, then they become so attracted towards the sweetness of these literature that their heart actually forgets about mukti and bhukti. It completely forgets. And it is mainly because there is some loving relationship they develop by the hearing of these, hearing about this literature. Similarly, in 25th verse, it says, absorbed in the bliss of service to the lotus feet of Krishna, devotees never desire liberation. Bliss of service to the lotus feet of Krishna. Bliss of service, seva. When the devotees are engaged in service of the lotus feet of Krishna, they forget any desire for liberation. So you see in these two verses, what are the two items? Hearing, attraction for hearing Krishna Katha, and attraction for serving the Lord. Absorbed in Krishna service is greater than liberation. So the joy they experience in hearing Krishna Katha and the joy they experience in serving the Lord, serving the devotees, they actually forget about liberation. They want every time, every moment, every birth of ours, we should be given pure bhakti, we should be given association of the devotees, we should be given the chance and opportunity to hear Krishna Katha, we should be given some opportunity to serve Lord Krishna, and so on. That is why, because of this higher taste, they forget any other desire for bhukti or mukti. So that is what the subject matter of chapter number 23 mostly. Now, from verse number 26 till 59, actually chapter number 3 of Nectar of Devotion ends with verse number 29, and there Srila Rupa Goswami is quoting verses from Bhagavatam, almost more than 30 verses. You can see 26 till 59. More than 30 verses he has quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam as a reference, where something or the other statement is there that we don't want liberation. We only want devotee association. We only want Krishna Katha. We only want service to the Lord. We only want this bhakti, this form of bhakti, that form of bhakti. Only those references are given. So the rest of the chapter number 3 is filled with those references, and in the whole of chapter number 4 is filled with those references. And maybe I can give you one reference which is a character popularly known to all of us right from our childhood, and that character is Lord Hanuman. So Lord Hanuman, the reference is given. Lord Hanuman is saying, I do not desire liberation that cuts material bondage, because in that stage of liberation, awareness that you are the master and I am the servant disappears. So you see, Lord Hanuman is the devotee of Lord Sri Ram, and he is in the mood of a servant. So he is saying here that I don't want liberation, because in the stage of liberation, that difference that you are my Lord and I am your servant, that difference disappears. I don't want that difference to disappear. In Sanskrit it says, Bhavabandha chiddhe tasyai sprihayami na muktaye bhavan prabhur aham dasa iti yatra vilupyate. So Bhavan Prabhur, you are my Prabhu. Aham dasa, I am your dasa. Iti yatra, in that situation, iti yatra vilupyate, it becomes vilupt, it becomes disappeared. I don't want that differentiation to disappear. I want that I should remain your servant and you should remain my master. Like that, you will see there are more than 35 verses or more than 30 verses as references from Srimad Bhagavatam and various other scriptures just to illustrate this point that devotees never aspire for mukti or bhukti. So I'm not taking those references in particular. The main theme is understood by you, and you can read those references in your own personal time to gain further insight into the topic. So with that, I will end my class today. All glories to the Nectar of Devotion. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Uh, any questions, any takeaways, any comments? We are happy to discuss now. Thank you very much. Hope that was understandable. That was not so difficult. Please, first of all, give me feedback on that point. Maybe you can take away your questions later also.
Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, class was okay, but again some references, some kind of mixed confusions. So these two Kritinas, we never discussed this in Bhagavad Gita, correct? This word never came earlier.
This word is there in Bhagavad Gita. If you read 16th verse of 7th chapter,
Okay.
then the word Sukritana comes there.
Okay.
The Lord says there are 4 types of people who come to me. Artho, Jigyasur, Artharthi, Jnani,
Yeah, that is there. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
But their motivation is not attraction towards the Lord. Their motivation is to get rid of their distress or acquire more material benefit, or they are simply inquisitive about some aspect of transcendence, and they are jnani. They are looking for more impersonal liberation. Yeah.
So they are at the bottom of the adhikaris, correct? What we discussed, Uttam Adhikari and
they are below.
Adhikari.
They are below adhikaris.
So that
adhikaris are convinced. Adhikaris are convinced that their objective is to please Krishna by serving Krishna.
Okay.
That is the objective.
But that means the Jnanis also are as a Kanishta Adhikari only. How can then the Jnanis which we discussed?
Yeah, that is something. Jnani is something which is ready to become a adhikari, almost ready to become an adhikari.
Okay.
You can say like that. Because he has developed that attraction, he has developed that knowledge, because he was in the past either a Artha or Artharthi or a Jigyasu. He almost now, like I gave you the example of the 4 Kumaras, although they have heard about the Lord, they had heard about the Lord, but they were still attracted more towards the impersonal Brahman. That's what they were. But when they got that mercy of the Lord, that the Tulsi leaves, the fragrance of the Tulsi leaves offered on the lotus feet of the Lord, that fragrance, when it entered into their nostrils, they actually become, that love for the Lord awakened in their heart.
Okay.
So although they had heard about the Lord, they had knowledge about the Lord, but that was not the prime objective in their mind.
Okay.
That is why they are Jnanis. They are still Sukritinas, but they are at the top level. They are about to become Adhikaris.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question was related to the liberation, Prabhu. So, like we all studied from last so many lectures, that our final goal should be reaching the lotus feet of the Lord, correct? Going out from the material world and reaching the spiritual world. But then this liberation which we talked just now, is it that we don't want to go to spiritual world or stay in the material world and serve the Lord with the concept of Das and the like servant and the Lord, something like that?
Yeah, see, what happens in liberation is, so we discussed about these 5 type of muktis, Salukya, Sarupya, Samipya, Sarshti, and Ekatva. So these muktis is something which is, we come out from the material existence. So the basic level of mukti, the most basic level of mukti is impersonal liberation. Impersonal liberation means we enter as spirit soul, we enter into Brahma Jyoti. That is the most basic level of mukti.
Okay.
But above that mukti is Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya, Salokya. These are also muktis which are at a higher level than impersonal liberation, which is entering into the Brahman level. These muktis are more at an advanced stage, but still they are still below than the direct service of the Lord, going into the spiritual world.
Okay.
So what happens in the most basic level of mukti is we are free from the anarthas. Brahma stage, Brahma, like you have studied in Bhagavad Gita also. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. If you go back to your chapter number 14,
okay,
verse number 26. So chapter number 14 in Gita, we are discussing about gunas, rajo guna, tamo guna, sato guna, like that. So in verse number 26 of chapter 14, we have discussed how you can transcend the gunas, how you can come or you can come out from the gunas. So that's what they say, that if we do bhakti, if we do devotional service, we can become gunatit, we can become above gunas, and become Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. We will become purified. So in order to achieve that Brahman level mukti, you can achieve that Brahman level mukti by doing bhakti only. आप भक्ति से भी ब्रह्म लेवल पर जा सकते हैं. उसके लिए आपको इम्पर्सनल साधना करने की आवश्यकता नहीं है, जो ज्ञानी यूजुअली करते हैं.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, okay. So there are wide varieties of transcendentalists. So each one have its own unique feature. I hope this discussion with Manish ji would have given you some more deeper understanding of the subject today. But if you don't have that, or still some doubts are there, maybe we can discuss more. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Ishwar Prabhuji.
The questions put forth by our Dharmic devotee are really very important, and you gave a very pertinent answer. We enjoyed and things got clear. Thank you very much to both of you for the question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Then I think there are no more questions. Now what are we going to do is we are going to do some quizzes, at least 2 quizzes on Nectar of Devotion. We will try to revise whatever we have discussed so far, because I got the feedback that the book is quite technical. There are definitions which seem very similar, so our mind may not be very fixed upon, or the concepts may not be very clear. They might be kind of overlapping, getting confused, and so on. So we will be revising the topics by way of quizzes on Nectar of Devotion. I am planning 2 quizzes on Nectar of Devotion. Already 1 quiz on Nectar of Instruction has been issued. On 7th of August, that is next Sunday, we are going to discuss that quiz on Nectar of Instruction. And so the next 3 Sundays, please be ready for doing these quizzes. So I want you to take this time to go deeper into the subject matter, to go through the slides, read the book, attempt these quizzes, get yourself well deeply absorbed in the topic of Nectar of Devotions, whatever we have discussed so far. And then we will proceed our journey further from chapter number 5 onwards. I hope you will also be energized to learn deeply more about this book. A very technical book, but I would say if you read this book or if you understand these technicalities, it should give you a lot of deep conviction within your heart about the subject matter of bhakti and how it is a very great science. It is a very accurate and an exact science, which normally people don't think it like that. So, with that message, I would like to bring this class to a rest. So, thanks a lot for your attention, attendance, and blessings. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Rakesh. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vanja Mataji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.